Hi, welcome to Naima Creates. I'm Naima, and today I am creating my Aladdin themed bullet journal for June. Of course, in honor of the movie that just came out. I haven't seen it yet, but I am super looking forward to it because Aladdin was always my favorite growing up. I have my little Aladdin toy in the corner there. I rescued that from when my mom was doing a purge of all of our old McDonald's toys, and that was the one toy that I rescued. So I have that just chilling on my bedside, and I thought that, he should make an appearance for this video. So to start off with, for the first page, I am doing the lamp, as you can see. I think for a lot of the things that I'm doing throughout this month, I was really looking at reference photos. I think that's so important, especially if you want to make sure that at the end of it you don't feel like, oh, what is this that I created? It looks awful. It's great if you have something to look at so you can really get a sense of what exactly the shapes were and you're not just solely going from memory. So what I'm doing here with pencil is I'm doing an outline of the genie. I've just went online, looked up genie outlines, and then I just looked at the outlines of it and followed it. So at first I thought it was actually going to turn out really bad, but it was pretty easy to do. Even as I was going over, especially the eyebrows there, I was like, this looks a bit off, but somehow it seems to be exactly perfect. So that's great. Then the picture that I showed you on my phone a couple moments ago, I looked up Aladdin font and then looked through the fonts there so I could try to mimic that font for the spread. I just referred back to my swatch page to see which color I thought would be ideal for the genie, and I found this blue, which I thought was pretty close. I was just using the Tombow dual brush pens, so the one side is the nib, so you can get the finer point. The other side, of course, is the actual brush pen. But yeah, so that worked out well. You don't have to use, any fancy materials for this. You can definitely be using your regular Crayola markers. I'm using the super tip ones because those are the ones that I had just bought when I went to Shoppers. They were there, looked good, had a bunch of colors in them, and I went for it. So that's what I'm using here. So it's not any special brush pen marker or anything like that. This is just a regular old Crayola. So this is a bit of the deeper yellow shade to try to get a bit of that gold tone. And I was considering using, I actually have a gold Sharpie, which you will see me using partway through. But for now, I was just shading it in with that same yellow. As you layer it up, of course, it'll get deeper. I tried to keep smooth strokes to reduce any, how it is with markers, when you go over the lines, then you can see all the lines that you did. I didn't really want that to happen, so I went back over it with my water brush, which you can see I'm using there. I don't think it really made much of a difference, to be honest, but, I did it, and I just want to let you know why. So what I did is I took that same marker from before, and then I just colored in a little bit on my palette there. It's just like a plastic palette. And I took my water brush pen and dipped it in it. So I'm using that basically as if it's paint, right? Use that to color it in. Those are water soluble, so you can also pick up the color that's on the paper, as well as, what's in the palette there. You don't have to use a brush pen or a water brush. You can just use a regular paintbrush if you don't have one. It's, up to you. So I also took a bit of a purple color because I just thought the blue was a little bit flat. I wanted to give it a little bit more dimension to it. So I took the purple color and added that in to make it a bit more smoky and more vibrant and just more interesting to look at than just the blue and the yellow on the page there. A lot of the colors that I'm choosing to use this month are purple. As you can see over on Aladdin's vest, he has a purple vest, and I think that's one of the main colors when you're looking at Aladdin. I'd say it's definitely purple, blue, gold. Yeah, I think that's pretty much there. Use my gold Sharpie just to outline a little bit, but it's quite dark, much darker than I thought it would be. So right here, I just glanced back over at my page. I created a page that has all the measurements so I could easily figure out the middle of the page without having to count all the dots. I made reference to that in my January when I was setting up the bullet journal in the beginning. I showed you how to do that, so you can refer back to that video if you'd like, just to see what exactly it is I'm talking about. Anyways, I use that as a quick way to find the middle of the page. Drew my line at the top and the bottom of the page, and then I just started going from there. So I'm doing the city of Agrabah, the palace, for my habit trackers. So each tower is going to be its own habit that I'm tracking. So habit trackers, the point, just in case you haven't done habit trackers before, I don't know where you're at in your bullet journal journey. It's kind of just a way of seeing the things that you want to be doing regularly, and then you can sort of track, are you doing them regularly? I think it kind of helps keep yourself accountable. So, you might be like, oh yeah, I think I exercised recently. But when you look at your tracker, you realize that actually it was 2 weeks ago and you wanted to be going every couple of days. So it's things like that. It's definitely helpful. And it's also just a way of, I guess, giving yourself a little bit of a gold star and being like, yeah, I did stuff. I was productive. So, boost yourself up a little bit. So I made these oval shapes at the top, and then I drew my line straight down. I looked back at the reference photo and I noticed that the columns were a little bit of this rounded shape, I think to give it a bit more depth. So I've drawn the line straight down and then added them in afterwards, that rounder shape around it. And I have 7 habits that I'm tracking, so I just tried to squeeze those all in, one in the middle, the 2 on, one on the far left, one on the far right, and then the 2 in between them in the middle. For the tops of the columns, there's like a rectangular shape, then an oval, and then a upside down triangle, like a cone. And then the top of the middle one actually has instead of the upside down triangle, it's more of a diamond. So I just took my fine liner, went back over all of my lines. Sometimes I love that because it just makes everything final and perfect in a way. There was definitely a lot of sketching going on throughout every single page of this. So there's a lot of erasing. I just kind of cut it out with the edit because, I don't think you need to see me erase things. But yeah, just keep that in mind. So if you're working on your own, take your time with pencil. I know some people like to go straight in with pen. You can definitely do that if you feel confident enough to. I personally, I guess maybe I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I like to have the pencil down first just so I'm not diving in and then I realize, oh, this is nothing like what I wanted it to be. So it's up to you if you want to take your time with it or if you just want to dive in. The thing with bullet journal, especially if you're going to do one of these more extravagant drawings, because, at the end of the day, it's just a to-do list, right? So you don't even have to be doing all these extra colorful things. You don't have to add a quote page. You don't have to do a habit tracker. All I would recommend that you really have to do is, put the date of the month, like put June, put the calendar for the month, and then have your to-do list going down. That's the main things. And honestly, there's some months where I just don't feel like doing that much artwork with it, or I just, maybe I'm late to get started with my bullet journal and I'm like, honestly, I just can't be bothered. I'll just do the to-do list and keep it simple. For this color right here, in that Crayola Supertips pack, they have a darker red, which it's a very strange color. It's not quite red, but it's almost like a brownish purple. I can't quite describe it. So anyways, I did that color and then I went back over it with the regular bright red just to brighten it back up a little bit. And then when I looked at the reference photo, I noticed that there was actually a lot of design work inside those bands. I couldn't quite see all of it, so I just kind of did what I could see. And even with this video, I'm not sure if you can quite tell the design work I'm adding in here, but it's a bit more visible in person. Either way, I just thought it added a little bit more dimension. You can definitely skip this step because, like I said, I don't know how well you can see it or not, but just want to let you know in case you're wondering, why is she drawing in red pen inside of her red marker and you can't see anything? So then I had my gold Sharpie and I started off with just outlining the first oval there, but then it felt like it was out of ink and I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Because I don't want to start coloring it in and then partway through, I can't get through all of them and then it looks crazy, right? So I outlined all of them first and then I just did the shadow part at the bottoms first to see how that would go. and I kind of liked it. So I was like, okay, let me try, using my marker. And once again, if you don't have a gold Sharpie, just use your yellow marker and you can see it will still look a nice shade here, right? But then it turned out, as I was risking it, that I did have enough ink in my gold Sharpie. So thank you, Sharpie. Appreciate you. I went over in the same shape. I did my lines in the same direction, rather, as the circle would go. I wanted to leave a little bit of like a shaded appearance, so it wasn't quite fully just all the Sharpie. And then I added in a bit more marker at the bottom parts just to give a little bit of shadow. So now I've added in my little dates, so 1 to 31 for each column. I would say to definitely check beforehand to make sure that your numbers are fitting in the squares. Yeah, and then I've actually added in each item, sorry. I added in each item that I'm tracking at the very bottom of the columns, but unfortunately my camera, I don't know what happened. You'll see later on that it just sort of jumps forward. For some reason, I guess the SD card stopped saving, and then I noticed it afterwards. Anyways, technology woes. It's fine. You'll get the point. I just use the same font from beforehand, and I'll use that font again so you can see a bit closer up to write out each item. For example, things that I've tracked are, like I said, exercise, like 15-minute exercise, or tidying up my place, so like a 10-minute tidy up. So every day you just do a quick little 10-minute tidy up minimum, and then your place is always clean and tidy, right? I don't always do that, but that's the goal. So I've used my watercolor pencils to shade in the background. You can just go straight in with paint if you want to. I just felt like it would be a bit harder to get in the small spaces, and at least with the watercolor pencils I can get in everywhere, and even if the water doesn't blend out the color, it doesn't really matter because you can't really tell. You could also just stick with the pencil crayon, as you can see in the background how the pencil crayon would look just by itself. Completely up to you if you want to do this or not. I just didn't want them to just be so blank on the page. Yeah, and even with the water brush, honestly, at some point it was kind of annoying me, so I wish that I had switched over to a regular paintbrush. I felt like it would have been easier. I thought the color was a little bit light, so I went back in, added a bit of a deeper shade here. And then, back to Agrabah, you can see I added that door. So if you actually look at a picture of the city, there's a blue door and there's that decoration. There's actually another red band going across the tower in the middle, and then stairs going down. I didn't want to get into too much detailing because then it would look really out of place. Like, why are all these towers just floating here when they should actually be connected into a whole palace? But just by itself, I think it does the trick. And it's perfect. Yeah, as you can see here, this is where I just jumped forward all of a sudden. But I wanted to make it look as though the sky was fading up into the other page. So I have that purple going up, and then I just used a bit of a blue. I mixed in a little bit of a orange, which was like a cad red. I did use regular paint for that. And then for this writing here, I don't know what I was doing, but I didn't space things out properly. I don't know what was going on. So you can see between let and your, there's a huge space, but then when you jump over to decide, I didn't want it to go past the word last up above it, so I kind of had to make the writing way smaller. And there was a few little things like that. I think because I couldn't see the squares for the grid spacing underneath, that's what kind of threw me off somehow. Honestly, I was watching Lord of the Rings while I was working on this, so, Legolas was probably on screen or something, or they were taking the hobbits to Isengard or something. You know how it is. So I just did my little carpet there. I don't really have much to explain about that. Just drew a square. I added some little small detailing inside of it, similar to the carpet. Obviously, I looked at a reference photo and went from there. So on this page, I am doing a Jafar staff. So it has the big snake at the top and then comes all the way back down. It's really helpful to use the grid spacing to get that line straight so you can have an idea of what you're doing. I was just a little bit inside of the grid, so yeah. Also, I did a couple sketches of of the snake beforehand. Like I drew it out, then erased it, then drew it out, erased it. And then even the pen work that I've done is not quite the same as the pencil work underneath. So just take a look at the reference photo that you're using, try to match it up, trust the photo. Sometimes you want to just kind of draw it your own way, and then you realize that that doesn't actually work. So definitely trust the photo. For the word thought there, this is really the thoughts page, but once again, I didn't really space it out properly. I was just, being YOLO, flowing with it, and then I didn't have room for the S. So that's fine. At least I got all the way to the end of a word anyways. That would have sucked if it just stopped at the H. And I used my Tombow dual brush pen for that in a deep purple shade. You can, once again, just use your regular Crayola Supertips. I think they're really great for doing calligraphy style. And I also looked at the Aladdin font once again just to see how, like, where are the thicker parts of those letters? How are those letters framed? The H is kind of wide like that. And the G has a little bit more of that ornate thing going on. So that's helpful. I used just a random little grayish blue that was left over on my palette. You can see I switched over to a regular paintbrush by this point, and just filled it in the background because I thought it was a little bit plain without it. Yeah. When I have my watercolors out, a lot of times I kind of just leave the whatever leftover paint is on there. I just kind of leave it because you can always reactivate it later, right? And if it comes time when I go back to do another painting and then I look and I see that, oh, I have all these random colors on my palette which are not usable, obviously I can just rinse out the palette at that time and go for it. But in between, it's great for things like this where I just need a small bit of color and I already have this blue here, so I can go for it. And also just about the snake, I used that marker to add in a bit of shading on one half of the staff to imply that there's light on the other side, and then a little bit on the, I wonder what you call those. Anyways, like the wings of the snake head. Obviously, that's not what it's called, but yeah. Aladdin decided to join us on the page and hold down the paper. So the income and budget, you can see, I kind of like how that turned out because the writing really does give me more of that Aladdin vibe. This page I always like to do just to kind of keep track of my spending for the month. So I start off with the job that I have, how much I expect to make, how much I actually make. Fixed expenses are things like my rent. Variable expenses are things like transit, because our bus cards, the way that they work is it just takes off a little bit for each trip that you make. So it doesn't really account for things like, oh, I didn't need to take the bus today because I got a drive or something. So I just put that in variable, how much I'm expecting to spend, how much I actually spend, right? And the bottom is owing, so how much I have left on my credit card that I want to spend for the month. And then the approximate extra is the very, very bottom. Like, okay, how much money do I have left over at the end of the month just to play around with if I want to go out to eat or, buy something on Kate Spade or whatever. Then I have groceries and notes on the right. So I always like to add in a little drawing to fill in the space. I decided to do Jafar's hat, crown, not sure what you'd call it. Is it just turban? I don't know. So we have the jewel in the middle there. So I started off with, in the darker shaded part, I added just like hatching, so straight lines going across. And then in the lighter part, which is at the bottom right corner, I just did a little bit of stippling, so just little dots. That way when I filled it in with the marker, you still had a little bit of that shading going on. And then of course leave a small little circle for the white dot, the little shine. Colored it in, simple colors, red, yellow, black. And this page kind of ended up being Jafar's page because, we have the staff on the left and the hat on the right. Finally, we get to the weekly spreads. Referred back to my year at a glance at the very beginning of my bullet journal to see, what day, how many days there are in the month and what day it falls on. So the first on this month is falling on a Saturday. Then I take my Tombow brush pen and filled in which week that to-do list is about. So the one on the left, as you can see, is for the first week. The one on the right is for the second week. I do like to go from Monday to Sunday when I'm doing the to-do list. The color that I chose, it just really reminded me of Jasmine's clothing. So really enjoyed that, and that's what I chose for there. And I just showed you on the right side of the page. I typically do my to-do list like this, so one week's on the left, the other week's on the right. You can choose to edit it as you want. I mean, obviously you don't technically need to have the calendar on both sides of the page, so if you really hate drawing out the calendar, just draw one on the left and call it a day. Make your life simple. You don't have to do all that, you know? So I'm using these Tombow calligraphy pens. I love these. This one is the soft one. There's the soft one and the hard one. The soft one I thought was great for this just because we needed a lot of ink. A lot of the way that the font is in this, it's kind of ink blotty. It reminds me, I think it's supposed to be reminiscent of Arabic script, and the way that those words are, it's as if it's written with a brush. I don't obviously know enough about it to say that 100%, but it definitely reminds me of that. Similar to how Japanese and Chinese characters are, like it was meant to be written with a brush initially, right? So between the dates on the left and my actual to-do list, which will be on the right of that page, I always have some sort of border. I'm personally going to use washi tape, but I just wanted to give you an option of what you could do. So I've added this little blue smoke going all the way up. You can also add a touch of purple into it too, just to tie it back into the very first page. And then I just had these two different washi tapes. One was the purple with the elephants, which, you know, is kind of Indian, even though I know Aladdin I think is supposed to be more Middle Eastern, but, you know, still that kind of vibe. I personally liked the pink one though, so I did that. Anyways, here's my final flip through. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you give it a try, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Have a great one.